Oh man, this has been an awesome day. Moving on to our final panel of the day, there is a generation of immigrants who have lived in the U.S. since childhood and only know this country as home. Yet, current immigration laws and policies do not offer them a feasible opportunity to obtain citizenship. This panel is going to discuss various new tools and forms of allyship that assist dreamers in tech to navigate fundraising and barriers, while also discussing the long-term effects of harsh, confusing, anti-immigration policy that exists in this country today. We're so excited to delve into this discussion. Moderating this panel is Eugene Sepulveda, CEO of the Entrepreneurs Foundation. We also welcome Lisa Woodson, Chief People Officer of Code 42, and U.S. Congressman Joaquin Castro. There you are.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Hey, Albert.
Thank you
welcome.
guys so much for being here today. Thank you, Eugene, Lisa, and Joaquin. I'll leave you guys to it. Have a wonderful discussion.
Cool. Thanks. What a great tech summit this has been already. Albert's doing a great job as our MC and going beyond the MC. I mean, he's lived the life. John Henry was an excellent keynote. Loved Maria, Jasmine, and Tony in the last session, and Lisa and Congressman Castro, thank you so much for this next panel. Just to introduce the audience, in case you are new to the region, perhaps if you don't know Congressman Joaquin Castro, you might get confused. He looks like the former Secretary of HUD Castro, who's his twin brother. Joaquin's the better looking one.
Yes,
and
thank you, Eugene. Thank you.
I'm assuming that Julian's not watching. So Congressman Castro has been in Congress representing the 20th District based out of San Antonio since 2013, right, Joaquin?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and you're chair of the Hispanic Caucus.
Yeah, I just completed my chair this past January, but I was chair.
Okay. So you were chair. Are you still permanent select committee on intelligence?
Mm-hmm.
Foreign affairs and education and labor?
Right.
Fantastic. So I imagine the congressman is exceedingly busy at the moment. So thank you for taking the time to be with us. Lisa Woodson, who we have mutual friends who speak really highly of you. And we're like, when I would call them, they said, no, you got to get Lisa, who's kind of in the trenches on this. I take it from what other people have said that you've got a passion for this topic. I know that you're the CHRO for Code 42 and have been playing in the space for quite a long time. So
yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, hey, let's dive into this. We want to talk about dreamers, but we want to also talk about immigration. And Joaquin, if we can start with you, what's the status of Daca and immigration reform, and where do we find ourselves?
Well, that's a great question, given all this time that the issue has been, percolating. But Eugene and everybody at the Capital Factory, thank you for putting this on. And Lisa, it's great to be with you for this discussion as well. Well, we are actually at what could be a very historic moment for the country to finally achieve comprehensive immigration reform. And that's through the budget reconciliation process that will go through the Senate and the House in the next few months. And this may be an opportunity for us to actually finally get this bill done. I tell people that the latest iteration or movement for comprehensive immigration reform, including for Dreamers, was actually, I think, kicked off by Dreamers in about 2006. And in 2013, 2014, the Congress had a chance to pass a bill through the House that the Senate had already passed to achieve comprehensive immigration reform. And that didn't happen. The Speaker of the House at the time, if you all remember, John Boehner, decided not to put the bill on the House floor for a vote, even though it probably had the votes to pass. And so here we are still 7 years after that and still trying to get immigration reform done. But this may actually be a chance to do it. It looks like there are enough Senate Democrats, in other words, what would be 51 Senate Democrats, to support immigration through reconciliation. But the hitch is that the Senate parliamentarian has to give the okay that immigration reform can be put into this budget bill. And so that's where we are right now is basically, we're in that process, and the next few months will be very telling about whether we're actually able to do it.
And the other important part for techs are H1b visas. So where were we and where will we be with those?
Well, it's interesting. For years, the quote unquote battle over immigration was mostly politicians attacking undocumented immigrants. But if you notice during the Trump administration, over those 4 years, the preceding 4 years, not only were folks going after undocumented immigrants, but they increasingly started going after legal documented immigrants and specifically visa holders. And so one of the things that this bill would do, in addition to giving Dreamers and Daca holders a path to citizenship, is it would also expand the number of visas, including H1b visas as well.
Fantastic. Hey, so Lisa, you guys are hiring all over the world and from around the world. What's your experience with Dreamers in the tech industry, with immigrants from other countries coming into the United States to work?
So I think it is two separate ways to look at it. So you just mentioned Daca as well as H1b visas. So the first thing that I would say is when it relates to Daca, there's a lot of confusion, especially in early startup tech companies where you don't necessarily have large HR teams that are well versed in the law. And so there's a lot of confusion in thinking that Daca actually requires sponsorship as an H1b visa would, which it does not, right? So the difference would be obviously you have Daca, which is the work permit, which allows you to get a job just like I have my job today, versus the H1b that requires a pretty lengthy and quite frankly, can be a costly process for companies. So I've done both. And I think it's really important to, as we look at hopefully the legislation that's going to go through that would expand the use of H1b visas, it's still important that we focus on Daca and really bringing diverse representation into our organizations for where we sit today. So as we're waiting for new legislation, we still have the opportunity as it sits right now today to go out and be hiring Dreamers.
And H1b visas important to your business or not?
So I think, yes, all of it's important. So if you think about the tech space, right? So look at Fortune 500 companies, look at a lot of the founders. You see a lot of those companies where the founders were either immigrants or children of immigrants. So when we're talking about innovation, the ability to compete, talent matters. And we should absolutely be looking to expand access to get the best talent to be able to drive our business.
That you bring that point, and let's drive it home. Even if we could find all the talent we needed domestically, we wouldn't want to. I mean, we know the value of diversity of teams, and that includes geographic and cultural diversity. Absolutely. So while we may have offices around the world, our teams in this country need that diversity of thought and experience.
It's such an interesting point. It's one of those things where the previous panel was talking about, hey, leverage the data. So when you look at the data, the story is a pretty clear one. You see a lot of the larger tech companies, really speaking out. It's good for business. It's good for our economy. Look at the number of even Daca recipients today. So we have 500,000 individuals who are in colleges. When I start thinking about, internship programs, early career, and really building those career paths, it's so much opportunity. We just have to be smart and go after it and make it a reality.
Well, and to Lisa's point, Eugene, even the Congress, right? DACA, of course, was started as an executive order by President Obama and fortunately has survived over the years. But it took Congress even a few years to make a final decision that we could hire, DACA holders, basically. And so it's not a surprise for me to hear that a lot of the tech companies still wrestle with that, with not knowing or not understanding, hey, we can actually employ these folks and they have the opportunity to work in our company.
So, yeah, no, exactly. Joaquin, what are other, sitting the depth and breadth of the committees that you sit on? I'm thinking education, I'm thinking labor, thinking foreign intelligence. What are the macro issues of welcoming and bringing in, foreign citizens to work to become part of, the American economic society. Are there broader considerations?
Yeah, I try to take a kind of a historical context and look at it. And the United States is perhaps more than any other nation. I know there are other nations where you have a rich history of immigration, but certainly the United States is a country that has been blessed that over the years, people from all over the world have wanted to come here and work hard and be part of American society. And that has been to our benefit. Right. And so the discussion over the last few years really had troubled me, because there was this real movement towards really shutting our doors. And again, not just to folks like dreamers, but even to H1b visa holders, right? And when you do that, essentially you're telling some of the brightest people in the world, the most able people in the world, that you're no longer open for them to come here and use their talents and benefit themselves, but also benefit the United States of America. So as I look at these issues, I think that we have to remain a country that is blessed by people who really want to come here from all over the world. But certainly, I mean, it's got implications for everything. For our workforce, our birth rate as a nation has declined over the generations. So we want to make sure part of the reason that you allow folks into a country is so that you have a very healthy and robust workforce. I'm co-chair of the U.S.-Japan caucus, for example. Japan is a wonderful country, has the third largest economy in the world right now, but its workforce is also shrinking because its birth rate is fairly anemic. And so that's a position that you don't want to be in. And immigration is a healthy way that you can make sure that your workforce remains young and remains strong.
Lisa, anything to add to that?
I was just thinking, I'm typically not someone who likes labels, but when I think of the term of dreamer, it's such a great label, because I think it's not just about getting the talent and the innovation. There is so much that comes to what you're adding in terms of cultural difference, but really just the perseverance. So what you have to go through to be a dreamer, and then how you bring that pride, that work ethic, that commitment into organizations, it really adds value. So again, beyond just the tangible, what's the technical skill set, there's more to it than that. I think we should embrace that as well.
And I absolutely agree, Eugene. On that, I just wanted to say, we get into this debate in Congress also about who should be allowed into the country. Mm-hmm. And look, it's wonderful. I think it's incredibly wonderful if you have a million brain surgeons or even, computer science graduates that want to come to the United States. But we also have to remember that people make themselves here in the United States. In other words, the country didn't get to where it is by cherry picking just the best people from around the world. Generationally, people succeeded here and become, who they want to become, and become some of the hardest working and brightest people in the world here.
Well, the data suggests that, immigrants have a better track record than the rest of us at, climbing the curve. I had an epiphany the other day, and it's occurring to me how this could be extrapolating. I've always told, Joaquin knows this. I have 13 godchildren, 6 nieces and nephews. It's like, my own high school. And I always tell them, look, marry the person that's going to help you become the person you want to be, that you want to be your, the mother or father for your children. And third, that you can help them become who they want to be. And I was interviewing for a position the other day, and both fantastic women. I was like, how the hell am I going to make the decision between this? And I thought, wow, who could we be the best for? So both super qualified, ready to go. I know they're going to have a lot of growth and success, but the Entrepreneurs Foundation and Culturati will help which one become the better, realize their dreams. And I think we have moved into an age with the bond between, the understanding between workplaces and team members, that we are going to be good for each other, and that we are going to help, Lisa, if you come work for me, I'm going to help realize your dreams. I'm going to help, climb all of Maslow's hierarchy. And when I think of that as a country or a major employer, wow, there's so many opportunities. And why would, anyway, I won't go into my crystal thing. Hey, what are some organizations we can join or practices we can deploy to be more helpful to DACA recipients and immigrants who want to work in the United States?
Do you want me to start, or?
Please. Yes.
Okay. So I think the first piece for me is about education advocacy. And when I talk about education, it's actually to people team. So if you think about, at the end of the day, I always tell leaders, I don't make hiring decisions unless it's for the people team. But what I am responsible for is a talent acquisition team who's out in the environment sourcing and trying to find the best talent. And so how do you start to think differently about non-traditional ways of sourcing? Where do you get to go, whether it's looking at not just kind of top tier schools, maybe you're looking at vocational programs, maybe you're looking at junior colleges, but how do you start to go and meet people where they are to start to create a pipeline of talent that is diverse and doesn't just look like the majority, quite frankly. And so that to me is absolutely where you must start, because if you don't have that pipeline, then in your organization, you aren't going to make a difference in terms of, who you're hiring. So that's number one. I think the second thing too is about being really intentional in terms of your initiatives. And so again, if I think about DACA recipients and just the sheer number that are in college today, internships to me and mentorship become really, really important. And so in the previous panel, there was some conversation about showing people the possibilities, right? And so if you think about someone who is in college and trying to make a decision about, where can my career take me? If you're bringing those individuals into internships and you're introducing them to technology and the different opportunities that exist, you start creating, I think, different ways of thinking, and both for the individual as well as for hiring managers in the business to start to see, hey, this can work, this can be a good fit for our culture. So those are two places I think are really important to start.
Well, Georgina, I'm assuming that covers your question. I have a question from a participant here, and I think you just nailed it, Lisa. Thank you. Joaquin, other points?
Yeah, I would just add to that, because I think we haven't covered it yet. But, most major American industries are still not representative of the full face of America,
right.
Including, for example, Dreamers and others, but the full LatinX community, for example. And so I hope, in fact, before I did the panel, I went back and looked at the specific numbers for the industry. And I think Latinos, for example, make up less than 8% of the tech industry, even though the population is now almost 19% of our nation's population. So there is a lot of work for the tech industry to do to actually, be more reflective of the U.S. population. And I've done a lot of that work in the last 2.5 years or so in different forms of American media, although not directly much in the tech industry. But I hope that there will be, of course, more conversations like this, but action plans by major companies and mid-sized companies and others to actually improve those numbers.
So, I did leave out part of Georgina's question. And Joaquin, this is right up your alley. What can we do to expand access to the education needed so that, members of the Latino community can more fully participate?
Well, I think a few things. In terms of the workforce itself, I hope that in Congress there will be some kind of student loan forgiveness. There's been a debate about how much, whether it should be $30,000 or $50,000 or a lower amount. I hope that we're going to see something in the coming months. The president extended the student loan payment moratorium until the end of January, I believe, of next year. But the reason I say that is because you have a lot of Latinos and really other Americans, young Americans, who are so burdened by student debt that it affects the kinds of jobs they can take on, including internships that don't usually pay very much. And as we know, internships are usually the first way that you get your foot in the door. People check out your skills as an employee, and then they often will offer you a permanent job. But if you can't even afford to get your foot in the door, then it becomes a lot harder to compete for permanent jobs. And so that's one piece. That's the after piece, after people have graduated. The before piece is that we've got to do a lot better job of making college more affordable. And so I've supported throughout my time in the legislature and then Congress, increasing Pell Grants, for example, and student loans. But so we've got to see a lot more of that from the Congress. And then finally, just do a better job of directing more students onto college, including into the different tech fields, which over the years in our high schools, I don't think that we focused on that enough. One of the few organizations that I stayed on as part of when I joined Congress was the College Advising Corps, that basically acts as a supplement to high school guidance counselors. And all it does is try to work with students to get them to go into higher education after high school.
Thank you. I want to add, so we have an example in Austin, excuse me, a company called WP Engine, founded by my good friend Jason Cohen, and the CEO is another dear friend, Heather Brunner. Last I heard, about a third of their workforce was non-college grads. They have created their own pipeline in their own training and development infrastructure to bring forward, non-college educated. Some will have some will have associate's degrees, but others won't. And they then work really hard to supplement their existing education, so that they will be able to pursue a professional development program that's unencumbered. And I think you got to see more of not only tech America, but corporate America adopt these kinds of programs to level the playing field.
I just want to add to that, because you just hit on something that I think is just absolutely critical. I think traditionally, when you think about an entry-level role, so whether it be tech industry or not, oftentimes if you look at the job descriptions that start with, a 4-year degree, 3 years of this, 5 years of that, really taking a step back to ask the question, what are the specific skills and behavioral traits that you need to do the work? And how can we move away from making everything be education based? Because there are a ton of people, whether they're dreamers or not, who have an extreme amount of potential, but they never get to realize it because there are so many barriers to entry. And so I think organizations really being thoughtful and being clear on what are the actual requirements. So maybe there are 5 things that we really want, but what are the 2 actual must-haves, and kind of reducing that barrier so that people can actually get their foot in the door and demonstrate what they're capable of.
Excellent point. Thank you, Lisa. Hey, we have another question from Ali Garcia. Most immigrants lack the education, resources, and funded needed to start an innovative business, because that requires the privilege to trial, fail, and try again. What can we do to support them better from a fundraising perspective and from a community perspective? I have some thoughts on this as well, but what about you guys?
Well, that's a great question. So I don't think in this country we actually do a very good job on this. And let me give you examples. And I'm going to speak about the Latino community.
Yeah.
Because the question was about immigrants. There are industries where Latino immigrants dominate as workers. In other words, they're a large percentage of the workforce. In other words, so for example, the agricultural industry, the construction industry, the hospitality industry. If you go out in August in Texas and you look at a lot of the folks that are working on a roof in Texas in August, a lot of those folks tend to be Latinos. Many of them are immigrants. What we don't do a good job of in this country is helping people move from worker to entrepreneur and owner. And there's a real challenge. I think it's a perfect challenge for people in tech, right? People that want to help transform people's lives and go and work with people who have the skills and know the operational set of what's going on at a job, but they just aren't the owners. So there's a lot of potential to take immigrants who are out there working in different industries and turn them from worker to owner. And I tell people that there's about 3 things I would love to do if I wasn't in politics. And that's one of them, is actually working on moving people from workers to owners like that.
Joaquin, we're going to talk about that more. And look, let me say, there's a move underway right now about friends and family, and as seed capital, and that's discouraging to some who don't have friends and family with other capital to invest. But there are increasingly organizations. Number one, people should know institutional investors are dying to find entrepreneurs of color with ventures to put money into right now. And you ought to get connected with an accelerator or an incubator. There's Capital Factory, of course, and I'm biased. There's Div Inc., which is really, really good in Austin. And then we have these community development financial institutions like People Fund that do a little bit more what Joaquin is talking about, which is are ostensibly to loan money to women and entrepreneurs of color that are creating jobs in low to moderate income communities. But, I happen to be involved with the launch of this one 26 years ago now. After about 10 years, we learned that the intellectual capital was more important than the financial capital, or at least as important. That when you didn't grow up with marketers and lawyers and accountants and other entrepreneurs, you were at a great intellectual disadvantage. Now you may have, this natural compulsion to get out there and make something work, but in order to scale so you can employ more people, we brought intellectual capital as well as financial capital. And I think we've got to look at that model for disadvantage for men and women who grew up in low to moderate income families. I think our time is up, and really, really want to thank you guys. Any closing remarks from you, Lisa?
I'll just start with thank you so much for having me. At the end of the day, I guess I have a call to action specifically for anyone who may be a part of a people team. And so if we think about the creation of opportunities or enabling dreamers to get into our organizations, it really starts with us because we set the practices, we set the organizational policies, we lead talent acquisition. So we're out in the trends, going to source for talent. And so be thoughtful, be intentional, make sure your teams are trained, make sure they understand the differences between Daca versus H1b sponsorship, et cetera, and make sure that you're educating your managers that this is a really amazing talent pool. It isn't something to fear. We shouldn't be worried about, renewals, et cetera. Individuals who have Daca today are still going to be able to renew, et cetera. So I just really being intentional and creating spaces to increase that representation, including dreamers, is really important. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Congressman?
Great to be with y'all. Thank you for this important conversation. And since I am in Congress and in politics, I'll end with a plea for your help in pressing our elected officials in the federal government, in the House and in the Senate, to finally get immigration reform done through the budget reconciliation bills that are coming up. Please reach out if you can and urge them to do that.
Excellent. Thank you. Albert, we're turning it back to you.